Welcome. Welcome to the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame induction ceremony honoring Jensen. I'm Patty Dreyer, president of the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame Foundation, and I'll be your MC today. We are live streaming this event. I'm located in Stevens Point, the heart of Wisconsin, at the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame Gallery at Schmeeckley Reserve on the UW-Stevens Point campus. We have speakers from around the state and the world today to join us, and we're grateful for the technology that brings us all together today. Thank you for being here to help us honor the legacy of Jensen. Robin Wall Kimmerer says that biodiversity is the imagination of the natural world. Many of us will learn through this induction ceremony for Jensen today that before his time, he understood the critical importance of accentuating the magnificence and imagination of biodiversity. It's an inspiring story and an important one for the times in which we live today. Also being honored today at separate events are Stan Temple at 1 o'clock and Gary Eldred at 3 o'clock. You may still register for one or both of these induction events at our website, wchf.org. Just click on the induction 2021 induction tab. Today, we would like to thank our event sponsors, the Aldo Leopold Foundation, the Ice Age Trail Alliance, Jaeger Mellerup Family Charitable Trust, the Luther College, Midwest Renewable Energy Association, Museum of Danish America, the Prairie Enthusiasts, Trout Unlimited Wisconsin Council, Wisconsin Society for Ornithology, University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point, and Wisconsin Wildlife Federation. Let me share with you a little about how the event will flow today. This event will feature two distinguished guests, two wonderful people sharing the highlights of Jen's life and career. And we'll also hear from the ambassador of Denmark to the United States. Then we'll present Jensen with his official recognition from the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame Foundation. Two special guests will then share remarks on behalf of Jensen, including his great-great-grandson. And that person, also named Jensen, will be sharing with you how he shares his great-great-grandfather's legacy through his work. An official legislative citation from the state of Wisconsin will follow, and at the close of the event, we'll show the video tribute to Jensen 2 more times through. It'll also be a time when we open the chat feature on the program for live attendees who are watching the live event, I should say. And through that chat feature, you'll be able to share your thoughts about the inductee Jensen and his legacy. And those thoughts will then be shared with his family in a transcript later. So let's begin now with a little bit of background from the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame and about the induction process.
The Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame Foundation was created in 1984 to encourage the growth and practice of a conservation ethic as a legacy for the people of Wisconsin. The Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame is a nonprofit organization guided by a board of directors representing more than 30 conservation organizations. Each year, the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame inducts up to 3 people into the Hall of Fame. To date, there are over 100 inductees who have been honored. You can learn about each of these conservation champions on the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame website or by visiting the Hall of Fame Gallery. The Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame Gallery of Inductees is located in beautiful Schmeeckley Reserve, which is a natural area on the campus of the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. with 5 miles of nature trails and wildlife viewing opportunities. Inside the Schmeeckley Reserve Visitor Center, guests can view engraved wooden plaques about inductees with quotes highlighting their contributions. A touchscreen computer gives visitors a chance to connect with Wisconsin's conservation heritage as they browse the stories and learn about the achievements of each inductee. Any person or organization can nominate someone for induction into the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame. Nominees have an array of environmental and conservation-related backgrounds and varying types of education and experience. From writers to artists, from educators to policymakers, from researchers to managers, Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame heroes come from all backgrounds and walks of life. Based on standards and criteria set by the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame Board of Directors, all inductees must have significant ties to Wisconsin, and their contributions must have wide-reaching impact, affecting a range of natural resources. Each summer, a 5-member Board of Governors reviews nominations. The highly esteemed governors are an independent body and have in-depth knowledge of Wisconsin's conservation history. The governors select 5 nominations to forward to the Board of Directors for their consideration. The Board of Directors select the following year's inductees from that list of finalists at their annual fall meeting. While voting membership in the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame is only open to organizational members of the foundation, individuals may participate in the mission by providing annual support as affiliate members. The financial support of member organizations and affiliate members allows the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame to celebrate, advance, and share Wisconsin's conservation legacy as it hosts induction ceremonies and maintains inductee archives. We invite you to learn more about the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame and Wisconsin's conservation heritage by visiting our website at wchf.org.
It's time now to introduce our first guest speaker for Jensen today, Bill Tischler. Bill is Professor Emeritus of Landscape Architecture from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Bill?
My name is Bill Tischler. I am Professor of Landscape Architecture Emeritus at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. I want to begin my remarks by saying it was a great pleasure for me to have the opportunity to prepare the nomination of Jensen, a man of many talents, to the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame. Jensen was one of America's most distinguished landscape architects and a pioneering conservationist. During his long and productive career, this Danish-born visionary became internationally known for his design of landscapes, his contributions to American conservation, and his philosophy that emphasized the significance of nature in the lives of people. He worked tirelessly for decades to have areas set aside for the public as state parks and state park systems, state forests, scenic areas, county parks, and sanctuaries. Jensen began his prolific career with employment at Chicago's West Park system, working at Union, Garfield, and Humboldt parks. While he was there, he became fascinated with the character and the beauty of the Midwest regional landscape. And with his friend, Henry Chandler Cowles, considered one of the fathers of American ecology, he spent many days exploring beyond the confines of the city. His extensive conservation accomplishments included, among others, preparing recommendations for parks and open spaces in the greater Chicago area that led to creating the Cook County Forest Preserves. He also served on President Teddy Roosevelt's Conference for a National Conservation Program, and he planned a park system for the city of Racine. He worked with his friend Stephen Mather, the first director of the National Park Service, to conserve the Indiana Dunes, and served as an honorary delegate to the National Parks Conference in Washington. There we go. Now we're showing the Indiana Dunes. The founder of the Friends of Our Native Landscape, Jensen spearheaded this group's involvement with many important conservation issues. The Friends were active in supporting the proposed Everglades National Park, the California Redwoods, the Boundary Waters in Minnesota, state parks in Illinois, and the prominent landscape feature Gibraltar Rock in Columbia County, Wisconsin. Later, after moving to Wisconsin, he was instrumental in establishing county and township parks in Door County. And while he was there in 1937, Jensen was also awarded an honorary Doctor of Letters degree by the University of Wisconsin. He also was a prolific writer. His special columns published in the Capital Times from 1938 through 1946 focused on a variety of conservation issues. They dealt with park management problems, hazards to the environment from unplanned sprawl, unwise highway improvements, park proposals for the Whitefish Dunes and Cave Point near Jacksonport in Door County, and the Ridges Sanctuary, which has since been designated a national natural landmark, plus other special Wisconsin landscapes. His outspoken views warning of threats to our environment were frequently published as letters to the editor in a number of Wisconsin newspapers. In 1934, after his highly successful career in Chicago, Wisconsin, to build a lifelong dream to establish the Clearing, a school for teaching landscape awareness and philosophy. He founded it as a place where people could come to reconnect with nature as a basis for life values. Today, the Clearing offers an array of classes in the arts and fine arts, humanities, and natural sciences. Upon his death in 1951, the New York Times called Jensen the Dean of American Landscape Architecture. Thank you very much.
We will go on to Daryl Morrison. Daryl is professor and Dean Emeritus, School of Environment and Design, University of Georgia. Also, Senior Honorary Faculty Associate, Department of Planning and Landscape Architecture, University of Wisconsin-Madison.
Well, I've had a kind of a long distance relationship with Jensen. I first heard his name, I believe, when I was an undergraduate in landscape architecture at Iowa State College in Ames, Iowa. This was in the late 1950s, about 5 years after Jensen had died. And then I went away for a while. I was in the Army. I worked in private offices. And in 1967, I decided I needed to learn more ecology. And so I entered the graduate program in landscape architecture at the University of Wisconsin, which was a very good move. My major professor happened to be Bill Tischler. And I learned from Bill about Jensen, Aldo Leopold, and other conservation heroes of Wisconsin as a grad student. I also saw the first ecological restoration projects in the world, Curtis Prairie and Green Prairie at the University of Wisconsin, Arboretum. And as things turned out, I joined the faculty in landscape architecture at University of Wisconsin-Madison in 1969. And I started teaching courses in planting design, as it's called, also native plant communities of Wisconsin. And in the spring of 1970, my first teaching year, I decided my undergrads needed to learn more about Jens Jensen. And we scheduled a field trip to the clearing, my first time at the clearing, in the spring of 1970. And we had a great evening there with Mirtha Fulkerson, who had come to the clearing and helped Jens Jensen establish it, but also former neighbors of Jensen, former professional colleagues of Jensen. We had a wonderful evening conversation with those people. And then I decided I really needed to spend more time at the clearing. So in 1972, I signed up to take a course taught by Floyd Swink of the Morton Arboretum on the native vegetation of Door County, which was a wonderful course, a wonderful week, as all weeks at the clearing are. And then I decided to get a little deeper into it and proposed my own course the following summer for 1 week, a course dealing with Jens Jensen's philosophy of design, some design projects for students, also working at the clearing, opening up some vistas that had grown in, so to speak. And I had a wonderful first week of teaching there, again in 1973. And I kept going back over a 30-year period. Every other summer, essentially, I taught a 1-week course at the clearing with slight variations. But all of those trips included field work, trips around the clearing, learning about the vegetation, but also trips to places like the Ridges Sanctuary, which, as many of you know, Jensen had a big part in protecting and preserving. Also Toft Point and many other wonderful natural areas in Door County. Anyway, so I taught for 30 years every other year. And then I came back in 2017 and 2019 for a little replay of those earlier years. Well, as a teacher and sometimes designer of landscapes, Jensen had a very profound effect on me and my work. And I want to say just a little bit this morning about what I think are some of Jensen's key characteristics related to designing the landscape. And certainly one of them is his masterful handling of outdoor space, forming spaces that were partially hidden so there would be mystery, making the landscape more intriguing to people. And he also is a master of working with light and shade. He would create scenarios where people would walk through a shaded area, then come out into an open sunlit vista, and then oftentimes go back into the shade. So there was a wonderful sequence of light and shade. And he thought about the directions of light coming through the plants, backlit lighting, which would intensify the color of the plants. And then he thought a lot about the seasonal colors in the landscape, sumac and sugar maple in the fall with the brilliant late afternoon light on them. So his handling of space, his handling of landscape sequences, and his use of light and shadow were very, very important. Also his pathways. He used to say we shouldn't have snaky paths, we should have arcs, large expansive arcs for pathways, and that influenced me a lot. He was also maybe most noted for his use of native plants in the designed landscape. He had been born in Denmark, as you all know, and when he came to this country, came to Chicago, he started meeting with the famous ecologist Henry Cowles, C-O-W-L-E-S, and they went into the fields west of Chicago and the Indiana dunes. And Jensen learned a lot of plants and a lot of ecology from Henry Coles. In Jensen's own career, he started working in the Chicago parks in the late 1880s. And his first native plant garden was in Union Park, where he created what he called the American garden. And he used plants that he and Coles had found in the field in the west of Chicago in that garden. And it was a big hit. At that point, most designed landscapes were designed with plants from other places, so they didn't have the spirit of the place in them. And Jensen was a great believer in capturing the essence of the native landscape in his designed landscapes. Again, the field trips were wonderful for him. And something else that Jensen did, which is really important, is he really promoted the preservation of natural areas, the ridges at Bailey's Harbor being one of them, but many others. And in 1913, he commissioned a writer whose name was Goodman to write a play, a masque, a conservation play, which was performed at many sites in Illinois and Wisconsin, particularly, that Jensen and others thought should be protected and preserved in perpetuity. And that was a really important aspect of his work. Something else that was very characteristic of his work was the use of hawthorn trees with their horizontal branching, which he thought was symbolic of the prairie with its horizontal dimension. And he very often incorporated council rings into his landscapes. And you saw pictures of those already. But I liked something he wrote about council rings. And I quote Jensen: "In the friendly circle around the fire, man becomes himself. There is no social caste. All are on the same level, looking each other in the face. A ring speaks of strength and friendship and is one of the great symbols of mankind." Beautiful. So the council ring became sort of a trademark for him. But again, not only his design work has been an inspiration to me, but his land protection of so many important natural areas in many places. So I guess in conclusion, I will say that Jensen has greatly influenced my work, but those of my students as well, and certainly the protected land that we all enjoy in many cases has a Jensen connection too. Great work, gents. Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. That was an amazing thing to hear about how Jens Jensen had influenced the way that you've gone about your work. And I think that idea about council rings and the circle, and to repeat some of the quote that you shared, a ring speaks of strength and friendship. I think these are messages for our time too. And so I appreciate that so much today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right now, what we're going to do is we're going to view a message from the Ambassador of Denmark to the United States of America. We'll hear from Ambassador Lonnie Denker Wiesberg.
Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to participate in the celebration of the legacy of the great landscape architect and conservation advocate Jens Jensen. Jens Jensen, like many other Danish immigrants to the United States at his time, ended up in beautiful and nature-rich Wisconsin, and our heritage bond to Wisconsin remains strong. More than 60,000 people in Wisconsin have Danish roots, and had I been in Wisconsin today, I might have stopped by a Danish bakery. But Jens Jensen was not just any Dane. He lived the American dream. Arriving in the US with nothing, he worked his way up to create beautiful parks and gardens and was referred to as the Dean of American Landscape Architecture by the New York Times. While he died 70 years ago, Jens Jensen's legacy lives on today. His works on landscape architecture are still being taught at distinguished schools, and many of his ideas about nature seem to have been ahead of his time and critical for our time. Jensen's ideas about preserving nature and protecting wild areas are very relevant in today's essential efforts to protect biodiversity. In February this year, the Danish Ministry of Environment launched a competition for Danish municipalities to incorporate as much wild nature as possible, including urban gardens and parks. Jensen's efforts to bring people and nature together keeps being inspirational. His idea that nature and green spaces contribute to our well-being is today increasingly accepted by scientists and continued by architects and urban planners. In 2019, the strong social dimension of Jensen's engagement in the Chicago West Side Park inspired the Danish contributions to the Chicago Architecture Biennial, the Cabbage Patch. This year, the Danish contribution by the design and architectural team Soil Lab will once again explore the social possibilities of landscape planning in the city and create common areas. May we keep on being inspired by Jensen and his ideas about nature. May we keep on designing green spaces that protect our biodiversity, make us happier, and give us opportunities for social interaction. Thank you very much for inviting me. I look forward to travel to Wisconsin again when the situation allows it.
What a great honor to have an ambassador for our country to make a contribution to our ceremony today. It's an exceptionally special honor for the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame. Ambassador Wiesberg's comment about Jens Jensen being ahead of his time and so critical for our time so eloquently sums up his legacy. Having visited the Museum of Danish America in Elkhorn, Iowa in March, as my husband and I returned a traveling exhibit about Jens Jensen to that museum, I am reminded that many of our inductees of the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame have often affected conservation well beyond our own state's borders and our own state's people. While a concentration of their work has touched us right here at home, their reach and positive effect on conservation often extend to wider horizons, and that's just one of the many beauties of living in such an interconnected world. It is time now to bestow the honor upon Jens Jensen on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame Foundation. We officially recognize Jens Jensen as being inducted into the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame. I would like to show you now the plaque that we have made to honor Jens Jensen. This plaque is created to hang in our Hall of Fame gallery at the Schmeeckley Reserve Visitor Center at the University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point, in Stevens Point, Wisconsin. The quotes on the plaque read, "Unlike other architects of the period, Jensen was not content to create works of art for society's elite. Instead, Jensen was concerned with improving the American environment in general, and thereby improving its people and culture." From William Tischler. Also, Michael Schneider says, "Just as important as his land conservation work was his earnest and passionate promotion of native plants for gardens and landscapes." We now recognize Jens Jensen as a member of the esteemed group of conservationists in our Hall of Fame. I'd now like to invite a extra special guest to accept this award on behalf of the Jensen family. I would like to introduce Jens Jensen, the great-great-grandson of inductee Jens Jensen. He's the owner of Jensen Ecology in Madison, Wisconsin. Welcome, Jens. The podium is yours.
Thanks, Patty. I just have a few things to show, and I know there's a lot of family members on the presentation today, so hopefully I represent them well. Having grown up learning about Jens, just through family connections and growing up in the Chicago area, being close to some of his projects, it was definitely something that interested myself and my siblings, without having a direct connection because we didn't have someone in the family that was really in the field. But that kind of spurred me on to, I guess, go into the field and then learning more. Obviously it wasn't something that you're automatically born with, but it was very interesting and illuminating to learn more from things from people like Bill Tischler, Daryl Morrison, et cetera. And I feel very fortunate to have learned those things and be inspired by it, and to kind of continue in this career in conservation, which I view as a very, I guess, worthwhile industry. I think most on this call would agree. It also very fulfilling for myself, and really fun. Get to spend a lot of time outside in nice natural areas often. On this slide, there's this is actually a pamphlet that Bill Tischler had given me a few years ago, from 1932, Roadside Planting and Development. Little screenshot of it. This was Friends of the Native Landscape, which Jens was a part of. And I find it interesting because a lot of the species and sort of techniques that are talked about in this pamphlet are things we try to emulate and use today. So kind of using those concepts from then to update our work today. And just a few shots of some landscapes. I've been fortunate enough to work on some landscapes in natural areas like the Danish Museum and the top left here, and other landscapes around kind of the Midwest. And again, trying to use those concepts and to use a Midwestern identity, I guess, kind of an appreciation of Midwestern landscapes and the biodiversity that really did exist here, and to try to emulate that as best we can. And I think just using using those concepts as a baseline for a lot of our projects, and updating them with modern techniques such as prescribed fire, or using maybe slightly different species that we're finding to be invasive, or things like that, and constantly kind of evolving with the science. So I definitely appreciate the opportunity to accept this on behalf of the family, and thanks, Patty. I appreciate it.
Yes, and honestly, it is so easy to see that your great-grandfather's work, Jens, lives on through your own. And how much more wonderful can a legacy be than that? Thank you so much. Our next special guest speaker is Mike Schneider. And Mike is the executive director of The Clearing in Door County, Wisconsin. Mike, it's all yours.
Thank you, Patty. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about Jens Jensen and The Clearing, the place many consider to be his last great work. This Jensen quote for me embodies his conservation philosophy. I think people have seen this already this morning. Everyone is entitled to a home where the sun, the stars, open fields, giant trees, and smiling flowers are free to teach an undisturbed lesson of life. Herein lies my task. In 1919, Jensen took the first step toward fulfilling a lifelong dream of building a folk school. He had attended a folk high school in Denmark, and it had had a profound impact on him. He was looking for a site that met 4 specific criteria. It should be on the edge of the wild, high on a hill or a cliff or a bluff, looking out over a large expanse of water with a view of the setting sun. After considering several locations, including the Indiana Dunes at the southern tip of Lake Michigan, a site on the Lake Superior shore near Marquette, Michigan, and a site near Windsor, Canada, he decided in 1919 to take his first trip to Door County. On this trip, he found what he was looking for outside Ellison Bay in northern Door County, and bought the first 75 acres of what would one day become The Clearing. Ellison Bay was a small fishing and farming village when Jensen first saw it, much different than it is today. Here at the bottom left-hand corner is the grand view coming in to Ellison Bay from the south. with cows in the pasture. The top picture is looking down Garrett Road from somewhere near the clearing, probably, into Ellison Bay, and then the bottom right-hand picture looking from that same site up Garrett Bay Road. Jensen was especially struck by the view coming into Ellison Bay from the south, that grand view. It reminded him of the view down to the sea from his childhood home in Denmark. The Jensen family used the property as a summer vacation retreat from 1920 to 1935. Here in the top left-hand is the Jensen family gathered in front of the original lodge. That's Jensen sitting down in the bottom left. Bottom right-hand picture, the family gathered down on the shore for a sunset. Upper right-hand picture is his son-in-law, Edison Wheeler. And the bottom left-hand are Edison's two sons, Kenneth Jensen Wheeler and Hudson Wheeler. The south part of the building that we call the West Dorm was the original pioneer log cabin on the property. Jensen moved it to its current location in 1920, then added two other sections within a few years, both of them also from log buildings that Jensen acquired from local farms. The original lodge was erected in 1925. It was another repurposed building, this one, the original schoolhouse in Ephraim. Jensen established a meadow from the lodge down to 3 white pines, which are still there, with the Bay of Ellison Bay and Ellison Bluff beyond. And here, Jensen and Anna Marie are sitting in front of the fireplace in the original lodge. And Jensen also in front of that same fireplace with what has to be one of the best pairs of socks in history. That fireplace screen in front of the fireplace is now in front of the fireplace in the schoolhouse. Martha's cabin was also erected in 1925 from yet another repurposed log building that Jensen acquired. This one from the village of Newport, an abandoned logging village across the in what is now Newport State Park. Its name honors Martha Fulkerson, Jensen's assistant at the clearing. The cabin is where she lived during summer for many years. In addition to establishing the meadow on the west side of the lodge, Jensen established a larger meadow southeast of the lodge. He named it the Homestead Meadow in honor of the pioneers who had originally farmed the property. He cut a narrow corridor through the trees to this meadow that provided a view from the lodge to the rising sun on the winter solstice. Also in 1925, Jensen built a council ring on the edge of the Niagara Escarpment at the clearing. Council rings are a signature element in a Jensen landscape. The clearing's council ring is a favorite spot for students and instructors to gather for sunsets and for campfires. During his years at the clearing and in Door County, Jensen, of course, learned to love the area's native plants, just as he had learned to love the native plants in the Chicago area. His advocacy for using native plants as key elements in landscape design is a major part of his legacy. Anna Marie died in 1934, and Jensen moved to Door County full-time in 1935. But between Anne Marie's death and his moving to Door County, Jensen took a trip out west. On that trip, he visited Frank Lloyd Wright at his school in Arizona. Jensen would pattern the clearing, at least in part, on what Wright was doing with architecture students at his 2 schools. Jensen would train students in the art of landscape architecture in the master-student concept while building the clearing. Jensen convinced Martha Fulkerson, his assistant, to come to Door County with him to help start the clearing. She was hesitant, but agreed to come for 1 year. She ended up staying for 35 years. If it hadn't been for Martha, the clearing would not have survived Jensen's death after Jensen's death in 1951. Jensen called his school because he meant for it to be a place for a clearing of the mind, or a place where things would become clearer. He often referred to it as his school of the soil. He originally planned to build a school elsewhere on the property and keep the existing buildings for his family retreat, but he ended up using the entire property for the school. In this picture, this bullseye in the middle is the cul-de-sac in front of the schoolhouse. And this center part of the schoolhouse is the only part of the campus of the school that he ended up building in this area, where he'd intended to build the entire school. Everything else was kept. All the existing buildings that the family had been using was kept for the school. The other thing that got built in this area was the dance ring down in the right-hand corner. So the clearing school didn't develop as he had originally planned. Those, so Jensen's landscape architecture students working with their hands, building the clearing. These pictures are out on Garrett Bay Road near the clearing's entrance, where they're building stone walls. Spring of 1937, on the day before Easter, the original lodge burned to the ground. It was just 2 years after Jensen had started the school. The lodge was also his house, and he lost all of his possessions. But he persevered. He built the schoolhouse in 1938 from a stone quarry right next to the building. He then viewed the plants in that quarry. And he built a new lodge in 1942 to replace the one that had burned down 5 years earlier. Also during those early years, Jensen built the Cliff House, his retreat at his retreat. And he and his students built the dance ring and an outdoor amphitheater deep in the woods that Jensen called the Players' Green. Jensen died on October 1st, 1951, at the age of 91. His obituary in the New York Times referred to him as the Dean of American Landscape Architects. He hoped that Mertha Fulkerson would keep the clearing alive, but she struggled mightily. Students were no longer coming because Jensen was gone, and the money Jensen left her ran out. Back up here. After 2 very difficult years, Mertha was on the verge of selling the property to the Audubon Society for use as a summer bird camp. But a close friend of Mertha's and Jensen's suggested that she contact the Wisconsin Farm Bureau Federation. He felt that they would be interested in continuing Jensen's vision of the clearing as a folk school. Fortunately, they were. The Farm Bureau assumed management of the clearing in 1953 and hired Mertha as a resident manager. During this time, Mertha helped develop a new program of study for the clearing, one that we follow to this day: classes in the arts and fine crafts, the humanities, and the natural sciences. In April of 1988, after a successful fundraising effort, one that was needed in order to pay the Farm Bureau for all it had invested in the clearing over 35 years, the clearing separated from the Farm Bureau and has operated under the guidance of its own board of directors since then. In Door County extends well beyond the clearing's 128 acres. In the mid-1940s, he chaired a 5-person committee of prominent Door County citizens whose charge was to identify places to establish county and town parks and county and school forests. He was an early advocate for Whitefish Dunes to become a state park, and I believe he may have done the same for Newport State Park. He was part of the group that helped preserve the Ridges Sanctuary from development in the 1930s and was one of its original members of the board of directors. And Jensen designed the iconic curving road between Gills Rock and Northport, yet another part of his legacy in Door County. His influence in Door County and beyond continues to be extensive and important. We honor Jensen by keeping the clearing the special place he established 86 years ago. In 2006, in partnership with the Door County Land Trust, the clearing established a conservation easement. It ensures that 94% of the property's 128 acres will never be developed. Further development is only allowed in 5 small areas where buildings already exist. And I'll conclude with the clearing's mission statement. The mission of the clearing is to provide diverse educational experiences in the folk school tradition in a setting of quiet forests, meadows, and water. The clearing is a place where adults who share an interest in nature, arts, or humanities can learn, reflect, and wonder. This is in keeping with the goals of Jens Jensen, founder of the clearing, who loved it as a special place where one could feel kinship with the earth and reassess one's life. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. What a lovely presentation. I would love to be there right this very minute. The clearing has changed so many lives because of Jens Jensen. And on behalf now of the state of Wisconsin, we're going to listen to a short video from Representative Katrina Shanklin, who will share our state of Wisconsin recognition.
Hi there, this is State Representative Katrina Shanklin with a citation of commendation from the state of Wisconsin. Know you by these presents. Whereas Jens Jensen was a trailblazing architect with an eye for preserving nature over aesthetics, informed by his philosophical belief that every project should involve working closely with native plants and ecology of a region's landscapes. And whereas he immigrated from Denmark to the United States in 1884 and began working for the city of Chicago as a park laborer until becoming the superintendent and landscape architect of the city's Western Parks District. And whereas Jens held a firm belief in the humanizing effects of parks and was a staunch advocate for the preservation of national parks, forest preserves, state parks, state forests, scenic areas, county parks, and urban wild areas. And whereas he moved from Chicago to Door County, Wisconsin in 1935, where he continued his fervent advocacy for the preservation of the natural world and continued his contributions to the park system, becoming a principal proponent for the Ridges Sanctuary, Cave Point County Park, Whitefish Dunes State Park, and Ellison Bay Bluff County Park. And whereas he established a folk school in 1935 called The Clearing, with the explicit aim of immersing architect students and the general public in nature and its benefits for the mind and body. And whereas Jens Jensen has been inducted to the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame for his passionate commitment to ensuring our natural spaces and parks are protected, now therefore, the members of the Wisconsin State Legislature, on the motion of Representative Katrina Shanklin, do hereby honor Jens Jensen for his remarkable life and dedication to wild space preservation, and thank him for his tremendous contributions to the Wisconsin park system and preserving our natural world.
Thank you, Representative Katrina Shanklin. We appreciate that so much. On behalf of the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame Foundation and the state of Wisconsin, we are privileged to induct Jens Jensen into the Hall of Fame and to honor his family today. So as we near the end of our ceremony today, we've now turned on the chat feature for all of you who are viewing the event live today. We invite you to share your thoughts and memories about Jen's work and legacy, and we'll capture a transcript of those thoughts and pass them on to the Jensen family. We'll leave the chat open for 5 minutes before the closing of the event. A recording of the ceremony will be on our website at the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame website, and we'll go back and we'll make sure that we help Bill Tischler's presentation be represented there. We'll get a recording of that and be able to post it, because I know he had some really important things to share about the legacy of Jens Jensen today. If you would like to make a donation to the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame in honor of Jens Jensen, of course, we welcome it. just please visit our website at wchf.org and click on the Join/Donate tab. Your donations will help us share the accomplishments of Jensen and other inductees with an even wider audience as we continue our mission of celebrating, advancing, and sharing Wisconsin's conservation legacy through the stories of our conservation heroes. Again, we thank our event sponsors, the Aldo Leopold Foundation, Ice Age Trail Alliance, Jaeger Mellerup Family Charitable Trust, Luther College, Midwest Renewable Energy Association, Museum of Danish America, the Prairie Enthusiasts, Trout Unlimited, Wisconsin Council, the Wisconsin Society for Ornithology, the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point, and the Wisconsin Wildlife Federation. You may still register for other induction events today at our website. Stan Temple's induction is at 1 o'clock and Gary Eldred's is at 3. This concludes our event. We hope that you'll enjoy the replay, that we'll play it twice through, of the video tribute to Jensen. And we really, really, really thank you for joining us on this beautiful day today.